He's previously held leadership roles at HPE, Symantec, CenturyLink, Siemens. I want to hear stories about securing PLCs later. I hope you have some good ones. Been a speaker at the International Conference in Cybersecurity, SC Congress, Harvard IT Summit, and been featured on Dark Reading and Wall Street Journal. Rob, thank you for being here.
So we're going to get through quite a bit in about 20 minutes of time. So I want to just explain a couple things. You've heard a lot of it actually already from Adam, which is great, as to kind of the areas we're seeing where AI is actually making some impacts within cybersecurity and transforming some of the things you're doing today, you're going to be doing pretty quickly. We'll talk a little bit about the aspects of the trust side of it, with risk and security, obviously, elements tied into that. We'll get into the kind of models that we've taken within OpenText relative to AI analytics, and then discuss some of those outcomes as well. So, stepping in, so kind of 4 top-level areas that we've seen within some of the areas transforming cybersecurity with AI. So one is obviously we've seen for several years where you take a lot of information back in, you try to create kind of this baseline, and you look for this anomalous type of activity as the first piece of it, right? So identifying some of the different patterns that are different that you need to further take a closer look at. The second piece ties back into kind of reasoning of the information. So what are we capturing? There's a lot of information flowing through. How are we taking that back in? How are we baking it into some of the new modeling, threat modeling, for example, that we're able to tie into? The next area starts in, again, more of kind of the educational. So how are we better understanding what information is coming in and driving contextual information back into things that we're doing? So some examples are earlier, right? Writing content. How can we take the knowledge, how we can pump it back in, be more efficient, obviously, which is the last key, right? That kind of taking the mundane tasks off of the human, enabling the human to be much more tied back into the outcomes the business is looking for, the organization is looking for from cybersecurity, and again, alleviate a lot of that kind of low-hanging fruit, if you will. To back some of that, there's a recent survey that came out and was looking at basically current kind of implementations of where AI is tied back into cybersecurity, as well as then what we're looking at expanding that over the next several years. So common areas that we've seen out there, obviously around what we're doing within threats, threat intelligence, what we're seeing within areas around identities, vulnerabilities, tied back into even data lifecycle management. So you start seeing some of these kind of use cases getting baked in and how they're evolving over time. But still, obviously, we're still in the very early stages of where it actually becomes much more valuable. As you can see kind of that line of, maybe at about, let's say, 30% across such a gap of opportunity to go out there. And that's just a sampling of use cases that we're currently seeing take effect. So then that trust factor comes into play, the risk aspect, and security, obviously, all tied back into one. So some of you may have seen this. This is actually the second iteration from Gartner relative to the way they've kind of modeled out AI, and they call it TRISM, around elements of where you're tied back into what is it that you're capturing for information, why are you capturing the information, and then how are you actually leveraging that back into making the right decisions. The second element ties back into privacy, which is definitely the biggest concern that's being seen out there relative to what's being captured for data, how we're using the data, is the data being manipulated, right? So we're seeing AI poisoning already happening, people going in, having access to data repositories, manipulating that data, injecting data. So how are we able to take actual controls into ensuring that the data is the proper set of data and protecting that information and protecting the end user information, right? There was, just this past week, OpenAI, there was a security incident that took place, right? An account takeover. That's just an example of people getting access into the people paying the premium service through OpenAI and now having information of their own personal information. That's not the AI security concerns we're talking about, but that's an expansion of people racing to get in and do something, and there's a lot of boundaries that haven't been set yet. The other piece is model ops. This is a term from Gartner. Model ops, basically, at the end of the day, it's really governing the AI aspect. What are the guardrails that are being set forth? How are you defining that back into your programs today as you're looking at different opportunities to bake AI in? So what I'm getting into is not going to be kind of the generative AI aspect that you saw in the ChatGPT examples, much more of the conceptual kind of aspects of AI, analytics, machine learning tied back into all of those things. But it's still important to have the governance in place is how your teams are going to actually use it. For example, at OpenText's, we came out very quickly, about 2 months back, to say, from an internal perspective, there are specific policies that we already have in place. You need to abide by these policies and how you're using ChatGPT as an example, and anything that you may be doing that's relative to data, information, intellectual property of OpenText itself, never mind anyone from our teams that may be actually touching customer environments. Do not leverage that at all. So again, we have to ensure that there's guardrails in place. That's an aspect of what we're looking at within Model Ops. Absolutely, absolutely. So what we're doing basically is some examples of that would be more like on our development teams and ensuring that what they're actually going back into and what they're using for information is all approved information. They have access controls in place. We have privileged access on top of them and what they should actually be doing with it. And they're not actually pulling the data out and effectively within our network environments or any connectivity through our network, getting access to any of the tools themselves, right? And the final element, which is actually new in this updated iteration from, I think it was around the fall timeframe, is tied back into application security and the AI aspects that are tied back into that as well. And I'll touch upon that here in a bit. So probably close to about 5 years ago or so, we actually created a center of excellence. Analytics evolved into AI. It's all encompassing. And it was basically, when we were initiating a lot of the work that was beginning in that space around, if you recall, UEBA, right? User Entity Behavioral Analysis, okay? And so that was the kind of first foray that we were involved with, if you will. And as we got into that space deeper, we realized there was so many more opportunities that we could actually unlock the value of to plug into other solutions that we have. And so we said, okay, let's stand up the actual center of excellence, and there's 5 principles that we need to actually put in place. Number 1, always the case, we will solve the problems that matter, meaning that there needs to be a specific use case that we will be deriving a solution for. The second piece is we are not playing a game of marketing. We're not playing a game of getting into the buzzwords, right? You go back 5, 6 years ago, you go walk the RSA show floor or Black Hat show floor, everybody's pitching something AI focused. You ask them, what is it that you're doing with AI? How are you leveraging that? What's the outcome? Blank stares. They didn't have answers. Things have evolved, sure, but still, for us, it's very focused on, again, driving and ensuring that what we're doing is going to actually have the problem solved at the end of the day. The third element was obviously driving, again, the efficiency aspect of the human. So that whole machine-partner relationship. And then the fourth element is a holistic model, which means that all the math behind the scenes is literally behind the scenes, but that experience, the user experience side of it is critically important. So we have to tie those things together effectively. And then the last piece of it is the responsible AI. Very difficult, but the reality is it's something that you need to abide by. Otherwise, we're going to have all sorts of different issues, and again, privacy is at the root of that. When we came out of the gates, I'll just kind of show you here, but basically this was a smattering of different ideas and kind of focus areas. If you look over towards the far right, augmented threat hunting was a key area that we started with and delivered upon. Because you have all the power of the data that we're capturing, basically what the threat hunting teams are doing out there in the marketplace, and you could apply a lot of that capability back in to automate those functions and to provide quicker answers to the questions that they had. So that was the first kind of element of showing some success. The second, towards the far end, is one that's in motion now and has been for about 9 months now, is around the IoT environments and into the OT environments as well. So digging in and applying detection capabilities back into looking at the different types of medical devices, vehicles, you name it, from an IoT perspective, and inserting ourselves at that level as well. So that's currently within our labs getting worked through because that's an area that we see as major emerging market opportunity. So if I take you into, from an OpenText perspective, what we're tying back in and give you some examples specifically, these are the 4 areas that we really focus our business on and solutions on that we bring to market. And if I step through each of them, we start with code security or application security. So if you think about this piece, for us, we have a rich heritage in application security. We've been doing this for over 10 years. We've been a leader in this space for over 10 years. We have the full stack of application security tooling you would expect and require. Dynamic, static, all the way over to open source. But the problem that you consistently saw in the market was, as much as we could give them the proper tooling to find the actual areas they need to fix to have secure code going out into the wild still became this battle of basically developers and security. Developers have a path. This is what I need to accomplish. This is what I need to develop. This is the solution it has to bring to market for our business, and it's a race. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to get it done. And then security inserts itself and basically becomes kind of this hurdle. Oh, stop point, feed it back. We found some issues. So you kind of had this consistently back and forth. People weren't really that happy. So one of the things that we did is said, okay, so where could we truly insert ourselves there to make that a much more seamless relationship while driving the outcome we desire, which is ensuring that we're delivering secure code. And what we did is we took from our, again, Center of Excellence and baked in capabilities where we actually are sitting within the developer interface, seeing as they're coding, on the fly calling out where there may be a security defect or vulnerability that they've coded in, flagging that, telling them exactly what it is, how to resolve that, click here if you'd like to go and get that resolved. So that is an example of how driving more of a seamless outcome back into getting secure code out into the marketplace has been very effectively used through some of the capabilities we've delivered from the Center of Excellence. If I fast forward into the second area of the four, security operations. This is definitely the space that is most mature in leveraging capabilities that AI, machine learning have been able to drive back into the marketplace, right? The detection and response side of it. If I go back to what I said earlier around, we started in this space as enhancing our security operations tooling with actually coming to market with a solution around UEBA, right? This was 4+ years ago. And what we found was we're not really solving the problem. We're helping a little, meaning that what you're trying to help out is quickly identify the areas of most concern for the analyst to actually work through the issue. In reality, what we were doing is we were kind of pinpointing, yeah, this is an anomaly, throw it over the fence, and then the analyst picks it up, and now they're still working through things, and they're not really realizing if there's a prioritization to this truly or not. So fast forward to what we've done is taking effect of what the assets truly are to the organization, whether it's the devices, the applications, even individuals, and understanding that as a class of assets prioritized by risk to the organization first and foremost, and then looking for and understanding where there are security issues that are occurring that are anomalous activity relative to a combination of any of those entities together based on the risk it is to the organization. Back to the asset again. And when we see something actually occurring at that level, that's what then gets pushed over to the analyst team. So what does that mean? They're actually effectively working on the right things that are most impactful for the organization. From a security perspective, they're able to focus their time and energy on the right things. Again, that kind of traditional level one, I need to deal with some of these items that are occurring, you hand that off. Right? And that's obviously where this automation comes in with SOAR capabilities and all of that market space as well. But again, our focus is on the risk related to the asset, related to the impact it could mean to the organization. The third area is around identity. And so within the identity space, right, so we have the full stack portfolio that has solutioning around access management, privileged access, identity governance, right? So it's a full stack solution. Great. At the end of the day, though, how do you actually tie these things together where we can tie in elements of unsupervised machine learning to drive better outcomes, again, within identity space? And so there's two different things that we've done here. One is basically we created this risk adaptive engine that plugs into any of the different solutions that we have there and is able to say, okay, as someone has come back in, they've been authorized, they're validated, they're accessing back into the environment that they should, they're approved, everything's fine. We continue to monitor and watch and see if there's any sort of suspicious activity. Did someone just kind of piggyback into their session? Did someone take over their account? Any of those elements that look like a flag, we go ahead and actually take action on that to say, there's something that looks suspicious. Here's exactly what we're seeing. The differentiators are these things. They can then go make their decision off of that. The other aspect is tying it back into some of the governance elements. So how do you alleviate some of the mundane tasks, some of the entitlement kind of reporting? So we're baking those capabilities in right now, actually, as it relates to how do we simplify that process, again, offload those in a much more efficient manner, free up the time, free up the energy to be applied to other areas. And then rounding out the final piece is all around the data side. So intelligence around the data from a cyber lens, from a cyber and privacy lens. And so here, for example, we're looking at things as it relates to, what are the specific sets of data across our environment? Where do they exist? What's the actual specific relevance of the data to our organization, to our different lines of business, right? Because it can mean different things to different people within the organization. And how do we have constant visibility to what that data is? Does it include any sort of privacy information within it? Did someone just put some information up into one of the cloud environments we have that includes intellectual property of ours? So having this ongoing basis of, in essence, governing the data, where it lives, as it's being put in place, classifying accordingly, and then taking the actions as needed. So things like, for example, again, solving and helping around visibility of the data to make the right decisions from a regulatory perspective. Visibility of the data as it's relating into people plugging now into cloud data warehouses. What's actually being put up there? Is it the right information? Do we have an opportunity to take action on that data? Maybe it shouldn't be out there. Maybe there's redundant data. We can minimize that data as well. We can retire some systems. We can reduce our risks because of those things. We can reduce our costs because of those things. So a lot of positive outcomes that can be derived from that. And then also tying it back into how we actually are able to protect the data. So again, the intelligence is understanding what the data is, where it exists, what actions we want to take with it. And one of the top-level actions we need to take with that data, especially at the kind of severity 1 or tier 1 type data classification, is to ensure it's being protected. So being able to apply the protection schemes on the data and ensure that basically the data is being used efficiently through our internal needs, our external needs, but also being properly protected at all times. So we're seeing a lot more advancement. So this area now is being injected with some of the things that we're doing around the Center of Excellence for a lot of that data governance and visibility piece at this point in time. And then really rounding it all out, it's just to kind of map for you from a solutioning perspective what goes into each of these areas. You can see here, Fortify is our application security part of the portfolio. ArcSight is all around the security operations, and there's threat intelligence that's baked into that as well. NetIQ is the identity access management portfolio stack. And then Voltage is all around the data intelligence and protection part of the equation. So that ties it in together. That's more to give you an understanding of, yes, this is some of the solution capability, but the key goes back to what we started about 4.5, 5 years ago. The Center of Excellence was built to put in place capabilities that could feed into any of these different parts of our portfolios, connect the portfolios where it makes most sense, but always focus on how we actually are driving the outcome as it relates to the problems that need to be solved. So with that, I'll leave you with, that's an overview of what we're doing, how we're applying our Center of Excellence into our solutions and bringing them to market. Thank you.